sticks away.
You sure? Okay. Mr. Love? You got nothing. Iska?
I'll always continue the conversation we started at the end of Monday.
Which was?
Use of psychedelics and drugs.
Ah.
I don't know.
Maybe today would be
Might think, but they're really nothing.
today would be a good day for that, yeah. Okay. Armand, anything you want to talk about?
Well, I just got my flash drive, another one. I have some data on here on ethics, so I'm gonna put that back on my computer. It lost my data, that's about it, so I'm working on it. So.
Okay. Okay. How about you, Carmen? Anything? Sure? Mia? Anything? Howard? Connor? So you guys want to talk about drugs, huh?
Well,
Well, let me put drugs on pause for a moment and talk about Trump.
first, are you registered Democrat or Republican?
Neither.
Oh,
I just vote for myself.
no.
You can't really talk about Trump without talking about human nature. So Trump really is irrelevant. And you can't talk about human nature without two very, very important branches as well as fractions that took place in the West. It's easy to react to the election results. All of us in this class have biases, that's what experiences do. But since you're sitting in a classroom and we happen to occupy a rather privileged position, we can sit back and talk about ideas in a relatively objective way. It doesn't mean that the pain and the hurts or the wounds will go away. But understanding at any level, I think, is helpful to some extent. So you have the West from the 3rd century all the way to the 13th century being a Christian nation for the most part. Everything is under the domination of Christian doctrine. And really, what is the teachings of Christ? The kingdom of God lives inside us. We've been expelled from the Garden of Eden. There is a way to get back, accept the teachings of Christ. And you do this for one simple reason. There is this battle between the body, or the passions, and the spirit. And down here, all that our bodies or our secular desires, whatever it is that you want to build, will be built on sand, and eventually they're going to fall apart. So why waste time? Why waste energy? Why waste life? As Socrates would say, we should have some shame and invest in our souls rather than in our flesh. But there is an assumption here that human beings do in fact have a soul. And human beings are in fact kind and compassionate and forgiving. That in fact there is a way for us to cleanse the world in which we live, the world of body, the world of physicality, the world of politics. Iska and I have children. And as parents, we know that if you forgive your kids all the time, they'll turn out to be rotten. So once in a while, you slap them, you scream at them. So remember, from the 3rd century all the way to the 13th century, what you have is the domination of Christian philosophy and theology, all with the assumption that something deep within is really noble and good. When the 14th century comes about, something very interesting happens. We have some events, but the most important is the bubonic plague, or Black Death, around the 14th century, that puts the nobility of human beings and the compassion and forgiving. Hello, Abhi, how are you? Puts everything under question. And for the first time, something really, really, really interesting happens to the way we begin to look at life. We no longer try to live according to the laws of God, but we try to live according to the laws of man, or human beings. We are now at the very center of the universe. No one really is interested in understanding the mind of God and how it works and why things happen the way they do. And we assume that God's hands are involved in things. 14th century comes about and cracks begin to appear. And out of this crack, you have this beautiful mind. And by the way, this is a time where we call the Renaissance, the new birth. And it's just our perception of things have changed now.
Are you talking about Europe?
Mm-hmm. That eventually contaminates or builds America, really. And the way we think in the 21st century. Around the 16th century, there is a man who used to work for the Medici family. And for those of you who may not know, the Medicis are the family who kind of gave birth to the banking system. They were very, very powerful, but they were toppled, they had to escape. And there was a guy who used to work for them. His name was Machiavelli. And the reason why I think talking about Machiavelli today is important is because of the election results last night.
Yes. It does not have to be good and moral to be a ruler. In fact, it is a benchmark power.
Imagine for a moment that you're dating an alcoholic. You don't know they're an alcoholic, but then little by little you come to realize that they are in fact one. But you're a church-going person. And initially, once you realize that they drink a bit too much, you assume, you create this narrative inside your own head that if I was to take him to church, if we were going to read the Bible together, if we went hiking, maybe I can help him through rehab. And then you realize that doesn't work. And every time he drinks and he becomes somewhat abusive, whether physically or verbally or emotionally, and every time you want to fight back, all of a sudden you remember this verse from one of the Gospels. First, forgive, for they know not what they do. He's drunk, intoxicated. The evil spirits have consumed him, so he doesn't know what he's doing. Forgive him. Second, whenever you get slapped, turn the other cheek. It works for you. And it makes you feel as if you are very close to being like a Jesus Christ for your companion. And every time you want to slap back, you remember the Gospel of Luke, those who pick up the sword shall perish by the sword. So you say, no, I'm just going to take the abuse, but I'm not going to fight back. I'm just going to continuously turn the other cheek. And you do this over and over and over again, partly because you believe in compassion, you believe in forgiveness, and you have some religious sentiments deep within. That the greatest rewards are reserved for those who suffer in silence. Consider the Gospel of Matthew, the Beatitude. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. But then as the abuse continues, you realize something really interesting. You're tired of your face being black and blue. You're tired of the verbal abuse. You're tired of the emotional abuse. And you do something really, really amazing. You turn your back to God. And you turn your back to all the religious teachings. And you turn your back to compassion and to forgiveness. And you realize you are not immortal and you don't have eternality. Your life is limited. You actually do experience pain and it's real. So there comes a point when he comes home and he's about to drink. Maybe he does. And this time he won't forgive. This time he won't show compassion. This time the only person you care about is not God and the way he or she may look at you, observe you. You don't even care about your parents. You don't, like Noah. The only person that you care for is you and your kids and your body and your sanity. And all of a sudden you realize what you're practicing now is secular philosophy. It's your body and it's your life, and you only have one of them. So you pack up your stuff, you give him the middle finger, and you leave. And you get yourself a nice little apartment. And you realize he comes begging for forgiveness. But you've been there, you've done that. You refuse to forgive. He comes back again, knocks on the door, and you do something really interesting. Even though you're faithful to the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not lie, you in fact do lie. You say, I'm seeing someone. In fact, his name is Mike Tyson, sitting on the sofa. Should I call him to the door? Would you like to have a chat with him? And all of a sudden, this old companion of yours has 2 legs, borrows 2 more, and runs away very, 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 very quickly. How do you survive life? Power. Why are you here? Power. You want to graduate because you want power. Degrees will give you power. You will begin to think better. And when you're being interviewed, you can use language differently. And you will make an impression on the 8 people sitting on the panel looking at you, asking you questions, listening to what you're saying and how you're saying them. You want to live in a gated community. I'm not talking about living somewhere in downtown Oakland, going to Home Depot, buying some bars and nailing them to the windows and the doors. Gated community. You want to go to Montclair, right? You want to drive through Snake Road and you see all these mansions, 50 houses in a gated community. The poor are not allowed. The homeless are not allowed. And there are securities everywhere. Power. I have read some of the essays that some of you have written for me in this class, and I usually put them through AI detector. And 80% of my students use that particular software. 80%. How do you survive life? How do you gain power?
Yes.
Deceit. You lie. How can anyone survive life without lying? Now, I know some of you in this class don't like soft drinks like Coke or Pepsi, but I need to make you into a customer of Pepsi. And I know you don't like it. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make Pepsi the very center of your life. I will talk about it constantly. Not because you like Pepsi, and not because I'm in love with you. I want to sell my product. And the more customers I get, the more money I'll get, the more power I'll have, the more companies I'll buy, the more people I will control. Not a single one of us in this class can survive life without power and without lying. It's impossible. Some of your writings are just not even worth shit. But I give you a grade. You even know yourself that it's nonsense, what you've written, your questions, your essay. And I don't give you a C because I like you. And I don't tell that you have no idea, I don't tell you that you have no idea what you're writing about. I give you a C because I understand the difficulties of life. So I allow you to continue lying to yourself and to me. And I won't push that into your face because I don't want to embarrass you. Remove God from the picture. What do you have? We're talking about 14th century and after, where you're not talking about God-centered morality, but human-centered morality.
Eurocentric morality. Yes, my people, my ancestors are not from here. I don't associate it with the birth.
Now, let me say a couple of things about religion and how it brings people together. And let me also say a couple of things about what happens when you get rid of religion. And then you allow the selfishness that's inherent in us. In other words, all of us in this class are selfish. We are selfish because we want to continue with our lives. You want to breathe. You want to have a roof over your head. You want your belly to be full. Pride allows all of us to be selfish. But this particular aspect of pride from the 14th century onwards is that pride is no longer barricaded by religious teachings. You're here for you and for you alone. And other people are like vultures, predators. If you have any goods, they will take. If you're wondering why in the 21st century all of us are here just for ourselves, there is a history behind it. There was a time the elements of shame and guilt and repentance, which had religious tones, it would connect us together in some shape or form, but now that's gone. And since the Renaissance, everything has been human-centered. How do you see other people? How do you see power? How do you see success? How do you see happiness? And this is where Niccolo Machiavelli comes in. Before we talk about the philosophy of Niccolo Machiavelli, and let me just also argue that for those of you who may not like Trump, and yeah, there isn't much to like about this man, but he is the embodiment of Machiavellian philosophy. He is the prince who will do anything and will say anything to gain power. There was this woman on YouTube. First, she shows her face to us without any makeup on. And man, she's ugly. And then, little by little, she starts putting stuff on her face. And man, she looks better than Beyonce. And while I'm sitting and spending or wasting 20 minutes of my life looking at this transformation, all of a sudden my imagination kicks in. And I say to myself, the poor man who will date her and then wake up next to her in the morning, is he going to be in complete shock the way you and I were when we found out that Trump won the election? And the answer is yes. How did she trump over loneliness? How did she win over loneliness? Makeup. Lie. How could she go home with a man? Well, she sweet-talked him. She appealed to the lowest part of what makes him a man, sex. It's all a lie, but it works. It gives her attention. None of us in this class have knowledge of anything in depth, but we have a collection of assumptions that we mistake for knowledge. And what do we do with those assumptions? We forcefully feed them to other people, impose them on other people. And just in case you have power, charisma, magnetism, other people will buy what you give them. Do you ever confess? Have you, anyone in this class, ever seen Donald Trump say, I'm sorry about anything? Because that's not what Machiavellian prince does. What's the difference between Trump and Clinton? Clinton went to his wife and said, I'm sorry. Went to his daughter, said, I'm sorry. He had this thing called either human ethics or religious ethics that made him feel guilty. And that guilt moved him to repentance, remorse, guilt, confession ultimately. Not Trump. Why? Because he is the embodiment of the philosophy of Prince. Every semester, at the very beginning of the term, you know what I want to do? About 9:05, 5 minutes after my classes, I want to lock the door. Gun violence. Oakland is oftentimes in chaos. And why do I do that? I've been here for 20 some odd years, never happened in my classes. Fear. If I was excessively in love with my students and I trusted them and I had faith in them, they will never do wrong, I would do this, leave the door open, unlocked. And just by chance, you may have some nut job coming into the classroom, being angry for some strange reason. And it's been happened before around the country. Laney is no exception. It could happen here. What is it that a Trump or a prince must do to hold on to his power? And just in case he doesn't have any power, how can he gain power?
Preying on people's instincts and fears. Lying to them.
When my parents came here and they bought the car wash, every week or so we went to the bank to deposit the quarters. And I remember there was this really nice, kind, stupid Caucasian woman. She looks at us and she says, "Why do you guys come here and take our jobs?" And my brother and I had to remind her that we wash cars. And in 1985, we actually checked to see what is the lowest of jobs, the least honorable job you could ever have in the US. And lo and behold, it was washing cars. How do you make one group of people hate another group of people? You dehumanize them, demonize them. And just in case people don't fear them, keep advertising. Immigrants, Haitians, cats, dogs, rats, snakes. Keep telling people. Eventually, what used to be a lie becomes a truth. We are by nature afraid of life. Your presence in this class is an indication of that. We are by nature afraid of loneliness, going on dating apps, going to parties. It's an indication of that. We are afraid of dying alone, perhaps. That's why we have companionship. That's why we have marriage. God forbid. That's why we have children. Now, we may not know any of this consciously, being aware of them, but they are in us. There are two things that you really, really need to have if you want to keep your power, whatever that power may be at whatever degree. You need to be two very, very, very vicious animals. You need to be a lion and you need to be a fox. Find the weakness in people. And that's not very difficult. For those of us who have kids, we do it really, really well. Do your homework, otherwise no TV time. How many of you really were thinking about inflation? Well, all of a sudden you realize the price of milk jumped from like $3 to $4.50? And that bothered you? Of course not. We don't really care about money. You pay $5 for a cup of coffee. This is not a culture that cares about anything, really. But you keep speaking this message. Our price is going up, and eventually people will buy it. Why? Because you've learned the art of cunningness. Why do you live in a studio and not a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom? In fact, why don't you have your own house? Why are you renting? I'll tell you why. Immigrants. And keep shoving that narrative into people's psyche. Who doesn't want a house? Who doesn't want the stability and comfort that comes with having a house? And who, in this day and age, doesn't feel that life has robbed them of opportunities? But the prince doesn't say it's the doings of God or Satan. A good, cunning prince will say, you don't have a house because of immigrants. You don't have a job because of immigrants. And do you know why foxes can be so cunning and can win? Because human beings are intellectually slothful. It doesn't pay to be aware, but it pays to be lazy. And what do lions do? Lions devour the enemy. Lions devour the sheep. Any of in this class know whether or not Moses was hanged? Maybe he was shot? No. Moses just walked away from the whole thing. When Moses realized that the Roman or the Egyptian army is chasing after them, what did he do? Exercise compassion, forgiveness? No. He was a lion. He drowned them. What happened when he went? At least that's what the book and the movie suggest. He goes up this mountain, disappears for a couple of hours, comes down with the tablets and then commandments, which he really stole from King Hammurabi, right? Some centuries ago. Some plagiarism there. He comes down and sees what? That his people, the people that he rescued just a couple of days ago, they're worshiping a cow. What does he do? Forgive them? No, he destroys them. That's what lions do. He doesn't forgive them. He doesn't turn the other cheek. You must not blame, again, for those of you, again, in this class who don't like Trump, you shouldn't blame him. You shouldn't even dislike him, really. Most of us hide behind this facade of nicety, that we are nice and kind and compassionate. And we only do that because we are poor. Some of you may not like me, but you need this class, and that makes you poor. Some of you may decide that, well, you know, I'm not going to do any work, I'm not going to show up to class very often. Well, that's going to delay your graduation. You'll be poor in another way. Now, Kendra. Do you have any questions? Love? What? Love? The what? Drugs? You want to talk about drugs? All right, let's put a pause on Trump and Machiavelli and talk about drugs a little. But let me first put out the disclaimer. In many ways, I'm handicapped in talking about drugs, and I'll tell you why. I've never done it. I don't smoke anything. I don't drink anything. Not even water, which I should. So, and since I come from a different culture, different tradition, all I can just offer you is some of the stuff that I've read and seen some of the people experiment. took some notes, and those are the things I'll give you. Sounds okay? Okay, good. Before we talk about people like Aldous Huxley and Carlos Castaneda, psychedelics, I'd like to talk about Sigmund Freud a little bit. Sigmund Freud lived to see World War I. It's something that Hegel had talked about, which was there is this army wearing red, there is this army wearing blue, and you're standing at the top of the mountain looking at these two groups of people fighting one another. They have no idea why they're fighting. All that they know is the reds have to kill the blues, or the blues have to kill the reds. But at the very core, they're both human beings. And they're both been deceived or duped into fighting for a ridiculous cause. Freud was, his father at least was a Jew, and he saw firsthand what happens to you if people find out that you are a Jew, especially if you live in a Christian-dominated environment. As a young kid, you see your father being pushed around because he's a Jew. As a young kid, you see your father's business go bankrupt because he's simply a Jew. And imagine being a kid, loving your dad, and seeing him being pushed around by other people. But there isn't much you can do, you're just a kid. You're angry, you're sad, you feel oppressed by all sorts of limitations that you have as a kid. That's all you do. You just swallow your anger and your sadness. He lived to see part of World War II. When Nazis gained power, his sisters died. Two were gassed and one was starved to death. He also was an introvert in the sense that he, for some strange reason, he just liked troubled people. And he wanted to know why they're so troubled. What's wrong with people? So he would go into mental institutes from a very, very young age 14 and on, all the way to the time he died, just to study people. So for those of you who may want to dismiss Freud as some coke addict, I think you should reconsider. He was really one of the prophets of the 20th century. Abi, Iska, and myself, we have children. And this doesn't happen often, but once in a while. Sometimes we look at our kids and we ask, what's going to become of them? How are they going to survive this world? They can't buy a house, education sucks. America is a land for the depressed and the lonely. People here eat alone, sleep alone, and most likely die alone. This is the software. And no doubt my kids and other people in this classroom who have children will fall victim to these forces. There is no escape. How are they going to cope with this? How do people cope with life? What exists in life? There are three things that you should know. First, I look myself in the mirror and I say to myself, who the hell am I? What the hell am I? Every 10 minutes my mood changes. Every 20 minutes my desire change. Every 30 minutes my goals in life change. Every 10 minutes I look at my wife, I say, I love you. 5 minutes pass by, I say, I hate you. 20 minutes pass by, I say, I'm absolutely indifferent. There is no stability to me. I'm a puzzle to myself. And I realize I can't even depend on myself. If I was to be like Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living. The truth is, when I examine my life, I realize it truly is not worth living. There is nothing in my life that's worth me continuing to survive the way I do, or I have for the past 60 years. So that's the first thing you need to understand. And no one asked you, but you're here. Now that you're here, there is no book you can find, there is no book you can buy to figure out how you ought to live your life. And if you have any awareness to it, you know that most of life is filled with a good amount of regret and disappointment. How the hell do you cope with that? Some of you are like 20 and you've been in 4 relationships already. Some of you are 18 and you watch your parents divorce. Some of you are immigrants, not knowing why the hell you're here in this country. How do you cope with this shit? Well, go back to Machiavelli. The only way you and I can survive is first, try our best not to see these things. You have to deceive yourself, and it helps you to survive. There is nothing wrong with that. So remember, the number one enemy is you. You are your own enemy. And somehow you have to survive it. You do the craziest things, and you gotta survive them. And we do things that we create guilt inside ourselves that'll take us months, if not years, to recover. And then, unfortunately, you and I have no choice but to live in society. Look around you. This is it. We'll spend about 12 weeks in this class, I think, this classroom. Any of you in this class have gotten to know the people in this class? Do you know their names? Have you exchanged phone numbers just in case you want to have coffee with them? The fact is, in society, you are invisible. And you will do all sorts of crazy things to make yourself visible. And you don't even make yourself visible to good people, because no one really is good. Goodness is only a thin facade. You know those plastic saran wraps that you put over like dishes, put them in the fridge, but you put your finger, it easily just pokes a hole and that's it? That's who and what we are. A very thin layer of deceptive narratives that we sell to other people. And once they get to know us, they come to realize that we are indeed hollow from within. You don't come to this class because you like it. You don't write the essays because you like it. You don't go to work because work happens to be an extension of your creative parts. No. You need a job to make rent, to make food, to make gas, to survive. If you live in society, you have to let go of the many freedoms that you had as a kid. It's what we call being socialized. Society tames us. I know you write great essays, MLA format. I know you want to write and write and write, But there's a word count, no more than 250 words. And even though you want things to say, you're held hostage by the limitations of language. Society is not a place where you can exercise your freedom. It's an oppressive container. How do you cope with that? Let me first thank some of you who are staring at me, giving me the illusion that you're actually listening and paying attention, but in fact you're just daydreaming about breakfast or lunch or dinner. That's an indication of oppression, that you have to lie to survive. Just this class for an hour and a half. Then there is another, so remember, all of us in this class, we are our own enemies, first and foremost. And then the pressures of society, the things you got to do that you don't want to do, but you got to do to make a living. And finally, there is Zoni, Armon, and myself. You just get old. Your back, your knees. This vehicle that used to take you to places to allow your dreams to come true. You know, you see a candy and you say, okay, let me just go to 7-Eleven and get it. But imagine if you have arthritis, all you have is imagination, but it will never come true. You will want a candy, but you can't walk yourself there. How do you survive old age when you realize that you're beginning to lose most of your abilities? That you have more time behind you than ahead of you? Yeah.
You don't share the same ideology.
Okay.
You believe weakness of you sometimes. I'm not sure I keep saying it. I'll say it one more time. But, even young people, they're entitled to have a hope.
No.
Yes, they are. They're entitled to have hope. I know. Been there, done that.
Okay. Then you get old. There was a movie with Penelope Cruz and that guy. You know the bald guy? No?
You know?
No, man, he's not bald. He's got still some hair. It's called Elegy. I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's about, I think, an English professor and a student of his, and the semester ends, and she asks him out on a date. He's about like 50 years older than she is, but they get together and there's a relationship. And it's a really, really good movie. But eventually he breaks off the relationship because she's only 25 and he is 60. And he is fearful of becoming really, really attached and then seeing her leave him because he's old, he's sick. And then at a certain point, she asks him if he's willing to come to her graduation ceremony at her parents' house, only to come to realize that he is older than his father, her father. And so he calls her and says, I have a flat tire, I'm sorry. And she's saddened, she's disappointed, she's heartbroken. And then she comes back knocking on her door a couple of years later, telling her she has breast cancer and she's going to die. But there is a scene where he is in bed with another woman. And this woman looks at him and says, you know what the problem is with a woman getting old in this culture? This is when I was 20, I would walk around the lake. All these men would give me a look. And I would feel attractive. I would feel visible, significant, that I had value. Now when I go out for a walk and these men look at me, it's not a look that says, I want you. They have pity for me now. They feel sorry for me now. I'm limping now. They're probably saying to themselves, why doesn't she get a facelift? Why not Botox? What's wrong with the way she looks? So these are three very, very important things that Freud talks about. That they all create some emotional distress, intellectual confusion, and anxiety. That you keep changing your identity, you don't even know why, but you just don't feel right in your own skin. That you have to live amongst people you don't like, and you're forced to do that. And as time passes, and it happens so subtly, one day you wake up and you realize you have wrinkles and you have no hair and your beard is all gray. And then you sit back and you say, really? Where did time go? Why did it go so fast? I haven't done anything. How do we cope with this? Now, let me put some words in Freud's mouth, though he didn't say this stuff, but let me just say it for him. If you live in China, you respect and honor your elders. If you see a 20-year-old with gray hair, it's a symbol of wisdom. You don't dismiss them. Just in case you want to get married, you don't trust your own 20-year-old intellect. You go to your grandfather, you go to your grandmother. They are wise, they're experienced. They will tell you whether or not this person is the right fit for you. We have no right to explore and experiment with life because life is dangerous. Given the fact that, everybody was making fun of Joe Biden because of the shape he's in, but the truth is he's just an 80-year-old man. That's what happens to you when you get older. You don't make fun of old people. You respect the fact that they survived 80 years and it's tough 80 years. But not this culture. Everybody just refuses to believe that they're going to get old and one day they will die. So given that there are no elders in this culture, how do we cope with the difficulties of life? Well, how do I forget the things I feel and the things I see? I can only sleep so much. Maybe I can drink a little, but not just a little. Maybe I can drink a lot. Because once I begin to drink too much, then my mind will become paralyzed. I will no longer think. I will no longer reflect. The me that has been held hostage by age, by the pressures of life. I can maybe dance in the rain naked, broad daylight. Maybe I can pick a fight with someone. Maybe I can shout and scream. Drinking becomes my messiah. And I don't drink because I'm a monk living in a monastery, coming to realize fasting and praying and repenting has done nothing for me. Therefore, I take alcohol to open some spiritual portal that lives inside me but blocked. I'm just a regular chap, not knowing what to do with life, or myself or other people. So I drink. To forget. Some of us in this class may not have the proper taste buds, or maybe allergic to alcohol. There's a store that just opened up in Montclair village. They sell weed. It's a very nice store, very clean. Every time we go to get some coffee or frozen yogurt with the kids, it's right there for all to see. And sometimes I sit back watching the people who go in, and if I happen to be in a relatively playful mood, I ask them, I'm sorry, are you going in because you have cancer? Are you going in because you have migraine? Is there like a disease that you have? He says, no. Well, why are you going in there? You have never done this? No, it's so much fun. If alcohol doesn't work for you, we can do drugs. Just to forget. Or maybe just to get some clarity and then forget. Because you can't survive clarity. It's impossible. It's too much. I'm not a Native American. I'm not asked by my elder to walk into a tent. I'm not given peyote by an elder, where first I have to do some rituals, perform some ceremonies, and then smoke, to have a vision, and then have my entire life transformed. If I was a young Native American in that ceremony, after smoking now, I am responsible for my community. I don't do to forget. I don't smoke to forget. I smoke to remember and then be burdened by the things I remember. So for those of you who sometimes smoke in this class, consider the wisdom of Freud for a moment. Loneliness, boredom, the pressures of life, carrying all of us is a bit too much. If you don't drink, you certainly will smoke them away. Maybe just drugs and alcohol, they're not your forte. Maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe you'll be like me. Or maybe you'll be like Eminem. Maybe you'll walk into the world of art. Maybe you'll create music to express your sorrow and sadness and the burdens of life. Maybe you have a journal. Maybe you'll go to school and study history. Or as many of my students do, maybe you want to study psychology because you want to know why your parents fucked you over. You have no passion for psychology. You have passion to figure out what the hell is wrong with you, or your mom, or your dad, or your brother. Every semester when I ask my students the first day what they're studying, and someone says philosophy, another says history, another says like psychology, I say, oh shit, I wonder what lives inside them. So what you really want in this culture is to study computer science because it makes you money. The hell are you going to do with psychology? You want to help other people? Really? If the world of art, education, or drugs don't work for you, there is one branch left that allows us to cope with life relatively healthy. And let me also just add, despite all the awful things Freud would say about human beings, about life, about art, he had thousands of books on art. He was a collector of painting, of fine books. And his own life, which is dealing with cancer near the end of it, is a testimony that there is only so much pain you can endure in life before you ultimately resort to drugs and alcohol. sometimes I'm home and for some strange reason I fall victim to these really dark moods. I just play the piano, not because I'm an artist, but because there is no book that can speak to me. And there is no person out there whom I can call and have a conversation with. And there are specific keys on the piano I play over and over and over again. And for some strange reason, my mood and those few keys have such intimate moments. And when my wife comes to me and says, "Oh, that was beautiful," what she doesn't understand, I'm not playing piano. I'm trying to express the pain that lives inside me. That's the only way I can express it. So this last branch, last messiah that helps us with coping with life is religion. Consider the book of Job, for those of you who know this book from the Old Testament. Why can't you just accept that life is random? There's some awful people out there who come and just kill your kids. Why do you have to ask justice by the gods? Life has no justice. But that's not what Job does. Job can't accept the fact that people can be crude and cruel and vicious, because he believes everything that happens down here happens because God wills it. That puts him at ease. When he gets sick, he doesn't blame his body. He doesn't blame his diet. He blames God. If you want to know which group of people have made the most profound philosophy of life to cope with this miserable thing called life, go no further than the Jewish people. Go all the way back to the Old Testament and forward to 2024. This particular group has been kicked out of every land they've ever gone into. How do they cope with it? They're just not liked. They're not welcomed. And every time they occupy a certain place, they're kicked out. How do they work this out? We are the chosen people. All the stuff is happening to us for a reason. And you know why God puts us in this tremendous amount of suffering? Because of his excessive love for us Hebrews. The Christians don't suffer like that, neither do the Muslims or the Buddhists. By the way, I'm not suggesting that doing drugs or alcohol in a controlled way or walking the world of art or becoming religious are bad things. The only thing that Freud is suggesting is these are the only tools we really have to cope with life. And if you can be in those worlds and use those worlds in a right way, it's good for you. Carmen?
Said something about how a lot of our ambitions are kind of just perceptions and survival in life. And I think I agree with that. What do you have to say about people who want to pursue certain jobs under the pretense that they say they want to save lives? Doctors. That apply to them as well.
You know, sometimes I think about Dr. Brian Kane, who opened my chest and put it back together. In many ways, I guess I owe him my life. But I don't call him, and then sometimes I say, let me figure out where he lives so I can send him a rug, a Persian rug. Persian rugs are like Persian cats. Beautiful. But then I say to myself, why? It's okay. He got paid like $500,000 for this job. That's a good enough reward. One of the things I think that happens to us in regards to deception and lies and regrets is you continue to save lives as a doctor, okay, as he did mine. There comes a point where his hand begins to shake because of old age, let's just say. And there is nothing that he can do to fix this particular problem. And he keeps aging, and his hand begins to shake more. And he comes to a point where he can no longer practice medicine. And then he retires. And then he has moments of glimpses where he says, I spent most of my life saving other people's lives. And who is there for me now? Not a single patient writes me. So while you're engaged, you don't really think like this. When you begin to lose your abilities, when you walk into poverty and you stay in poverty and you can't get yourself out, then you begin to ask yourself. See, right now, I think Zoni is absolutely right in the sense that you are young and you are filled with hope, as you should be, because life in many ways can give you beautiful, wonderful things that are cause for joy and happiness and meaning, okay? The tragedy, I think, that we are a victim of is as you change, as you transition from one stage to another, your demands begin to change. Your desires begin to change. It may be that at the age of 18, sex is a wonderful thing. And you relish in it. You have fun with it. You experiment, explore your own body, the other person's body. But maybe at the age of 25, after having gone through 4 or 5 different men, you say, you know what? I really want some meaningful companionship. Okay? And you realize your life is now a bit more busy. You don't have time to date as often. And you sit back and you say, man, from the age 18 to 24, I was with all these people for what? Was I so stupid? What the hell did I do with my time? So regret happens when you walk into a different stage in life, and that particular stage forces you to look back and examine. And it happens to all of us. None of us are exempt from this. Time and your own psyche will force reflection upon you. It doesn't mean that you can do anything about it. It may be that you begin to examine, reflect, feel, get depressed for a little bit, and then climb out of depression and continue with your life. Okay? So there comes a point you have a very meaningful relationship. And you're getting older, you're a woman, you're now 27, 28, you say, I wouldn't mind, marrying this guy and having children with him, having a family. And then you summon up the courage and you say, so Brad, don't you want to ask me? Ask you what? Indian food tonight? No, you idiot. How about marriage? Marriage? I'm not really ready for it. We've been together for 5 years. Now, how or why this all of a sudden happens to you, I don't really know. All I know is that you no longer want casual sex. You no longer want a relationship that has meaning, but the future is unknown. You want to stabilize your life. And in some shape or form, that is what marriage does. And he says, no, I don't think so. And then you look back and say, really, I wish I had 5 years of my life with Brad. And in the end, I'm in a pit that's dark. Okay? Or, he may say yes, but he doesn't have a job. And you guys are having a good time, it's fine, everything's fine. Working at Home Depot in and out is okay. Maybe making $60,000 a year, that's fine too. But then at a certain point, you as a woman, your body will say, I want children. And then you get pregnant. Both of you are excited, happy. But you realize children are expensive. This guy doesn't make any money. And you want to stay home with your kid. And you don't want to make the mistake that your own mom made, which was you were born, she was always out there working because of financial situations. But you realize this guy's an idiot. And then you sit back and you say, of all the people in my life, of all the people I could marry, I chose this guy. He's great, but he's really not a good father, perhaps. He doesn't make much money. And the point I'm trying to make is, whenever you're forced by life to reflect on the things you have done, some can be the cause for joy, many things are cause for sorrow and regret. But I go back again to what Zoni suggested. You're young, you ought to be hopeful, it is your right. But life has a tendency of creating regret. That's what it does. Quinn?
What do you think of like people who are, like they can retire when they're older, but they keep working? Do you think it's like they're like years old? So would you think be able to do that?
So there are a couple of things. No one, first of all, is ready to get old. It just happens upon you. Second, no one really knows or understands fully and healthily what will become of you upon retirement. All you know is that I don't want to walk the classroom anymore. I don't want to come to Laney anymore. I just want to sit and rest, okay? And there is this narrative that's going around, which is at 62, you should just let it go now. Or it's not 60, maybe 65, maybe 67. At a certain point, you should just quit and just slowly walk to the sunset, or at least enjoy the rest of your life, okay? But I remember my father, when his friends retired, and my father was telling them that he too was thinking about retiring. He says one day, four of his friends knock on a door, and he opens the door, and they tell him, Nasser, don't ever retire because it's going to kill you. We retired last year. We have nothing to do, and life is so boring. You don't have to like your job, but it keeps you engaged, it keeps you active. If you happen to be an artist of sorts, if you happen to have a hobby of sorts that can engage you and keep you active, intellectually, especially, mentally, I think retirement could be good. I'm not there yet, so I can't really speak about this honestly. But I think most of the decisions that we make in life revolve around a lot of different assumptions, unexamined assumptions. And one of the things that time does, assumptions are like a man or a woman with a lot of makeup. You don't really know what they look like underneath the makeup, okay? That's what assumptions do. They look really good. So you move forward. And then as time passes, time removes the makeup, and then you begin to see it. And then that's when regret comes about. That I should have thought about this twice, or thrice, or thrice, if they are words. So, all I know is that the human body needs to kind of move around a little bit. Human mind needs to move around a little bit. You have to have a space where emotionally you're inspired once in a while. Some people take up, I don't know. So you're not there yet. You have another 100 years to go, Quinn. So such questions are beneath you. Go out and have a good time with life. It's good to see all of you. Take good care.